police en France. Et ça, c'est vraiment comment ça, c'est une responsabilité des médias qui, lorsqu'il s'agit de policiers aux États-Unis, disent un policier blanc a assassiné un jeune noir, ça ils le disent, ils l'écrivent, mais lorsqu'il s'agit en France, c'est heurts dans les quartiers.
Notre cauchemar a commencé le 6 mars 2015, quand un matin on reçoit un appel et qu'on nous dit qu'Amadou est mort. On nous dit qu'il aurait fait un malaise. Seulement, c'est en se rendant à l'Institut médico-légal et en découvrant son corps couvert d'un drap blanc et le visage couvert de coups qu'on s'est aperçu que non, il n'a pas fait un malaise. Car il est arrivé mort au commissariat 2h30 après son arrestation. Alors que le commissariat se trouvait à 600 mètres. Quand il fait avec Amadou pendant 2 heures, toujours aucun juge d'instruction n'est nommé dans cette affaire. Personne ne nous écoute. Personne ne prête attention à nous.
Comme beaucoup de Noirs.
So it was interesting for me to compare the way the American news related to police brutality were covered versus the way it was not covered in France. And lately, so the Adama Traoré case was more covered than usually. And lately, maybe you've heard about Théo Luaka, who was raped by the police. But what I found interesting was the fact that even for those 2 men, the race was never mentioned. So we could guess that Adama Traoré was black because of his name and because we saw his siblings and his mother. Same for Théo Luaka, because we saw his picture, the video of him, but we never knew anything about nothing about their race was really said openly, and nothing about the race of the police officers. So it's interesting because we know everybody knows the reason why they have been arrested, they have been brutalized, but nobody wants to accept even to name the reason why. And so I told you that in France you can be randomly checked by the police, and recently the Defender of Rights, le défenseur des droits, published a study that said that if you are young and seen as an Arab or black, you are 20 times more likely to be checked than anyone else. So that means that you have a category of the population who is constantly exposed to the police. And we know that since the 70s, all the uprisings that occurred in the banlieue just started because of something related to a police interaction. And it really started in the 80s. There was a march in 1983 that was named La Marche pour l'égalité contre le racisme, the March for Equality and Against Racism. It started because a young man from Algerian background, Toumi Jaija, was shot. He was 19. He was shot by the police, and he spent 1 month in hospital and 2 weeks in coma. And when he woke up, he decided to march. So there were a dozen in Marseille, and by the time they arrived to Paris, so walking during almost 2 months, there were 1,100. And the thing is that today in France, nobody even remembers the march. And it was, if you compare it to the march on Washington, that was actually that inspired that march, in proportion, there were more people in Paris than in Washington. But if you ask to someone today about that march, nobody remembers it. Even if all the people who marched at the time, most of them are still alive and they are still, living in Marseille or in Lyon. So it's something that we really do in France, is like organizing amnesia. And it's something that we're really good at. The other thing I wanted to tell quickly about is the representation of minorities in the media, and maybe we could speak more about that. So Maboula told that I work on TV as a pundit, so most of the times I'm the only woman and obviously the only person of color around the table. And it's interesting because there are so many debates about race, but you never have people, who belong to those races, who are, just asked to tell about their own experience. And that's one of the things that really struck me in 2004. It was the debate about the hijab in schools. It was like an everyday debate. All the time on TV there was a debate about, those girls who wanted to invade schools with the hijab. And I've never seen, maybe once or twice, I've almost never seen any hijabi woman just telling about their own perspective, and it's something that is really, really common in France. And the last report of the Conseil supérieur de l'audiovisuel, which is the French FCC, says that 14% of non-white people appear on TV, so mostly in lower socio-professional categories. And when it comes to illegal or marginal activities, the rate is 37%. And only 9% of them are heroes. 29% of the negative attitudes are impersonated by people seen as non-white. And the sociologist Marie-France Malonga described 3 types of characters impersonated by black people and minorities. So the first is the victim, a poor person, someone from the banlieue, an undocumented person, or an enslaved person. It's someone who is irresponsible and unhappy, and generally the person is saved by a white person. The second character is the criminal, so often connected with the banlieue, and he or she can be a bad citizen or troublemaker. The third one is the savage, so someone who is backwards, uneducated, and who doesn't know the codes of the civilization. And for black people, it's often wizards or marabout, those kind of people. So there have been some, to stop on a positive note, there have been some changes, especially in the cinema. Lately, 2 films have been released. One of them is Il a déjà tes yeux, directed by Lucien Jean-Baptiste. He even has Your Eyes. And the other one is L'Ascension, directed by Ludovic Bernard and produced by a black producer who is Laurence Lascaré. Merci.
Merci.